let's get going. And I'll just start. I won't take too long to introduce you, Kevin. I'll just say thank you so much for coming. It's always so exciting to hear from an MVP, particularly one who's been such a long-standing supporter of SCOM and everything that Microsoft do with their monitoring. And we couldn't ask for a better person to be covering the topic today of monitoring in a modern Microsoft world. And I love the question you put on there on when we advertised it of where do you start? So Kevin, we're hoping you're going to answer that. I'm sure you will. So we'll hand over to you. So Kevin, over to you, mate. And thank you again for coming along.
Thanks, Tim. No problem. I think in a roundabout way, you're just saying, like, I'm just getting old because I'm in the community so long, really, more so than, long-standing supporter. But I do appreciate the accolades. Thanks so much. Well, hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining my session. It's been a long, long time since I've met most of you in this community in person. Hopefully, over the next 6 to 12 months, we can change that. But it's always great when we have awesome online virtual events like this where we can still connect, we can still shoot the breeze around topics that we love discussing in the monitoring world. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Kevin Green. I'm a 10-year Microsoft MVP in the Microsoft Cloud and Data Center space. I, for many years, have had a primary focus on SCOM. But over the last couple of years, I'm working for a company in a company in Ireland called Ergo, and I'm now the public cloud practice lead. So everything cloud comes into my team and my practice, and we deliver projects for our customers. Regardless of the cloud platform or the manner, the method, we still need to monitor those workloads. And I certainly do have a place in those monitoring scenarios for SCOM. But hopefully in this session, you'll learn about a couple of other things like Azure Monitor and even Microsoft Sentinel, where we can talk and give you some ideas as to, which product to use in which scenario. And also hopefully to give you that warm, fuzzy feeling that, your on-premises SCOM skills as such are not going away anytime soon. If you want to stay in that world, you can stay in that world. But if you want to modernize and kind of go hybrid, your skills will transfer, and hopefully in this session, I'll show you guys and girls exactly how that's going to happen. So we kick off. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about SCOM. I know there's been a lot of SCOM sessions already today. Really awesome. I've been enjoying catching up on some of the other teams' sessions. I will go over focus on SCOM 22, some things that were gotchas for me when I started deploying it. Then I'll talk about Azure Monitor, Microsoft Sentinel, and then a tiny bit about futures, just to bring you up to speed and set the scene for what's coming, hopefully over the next year or so. So first up, SCOM. So it's not going anywhere. Hopefully, if you haven't got that message at this stage, this is not marketing speak. This is not, us trying to say, oh, look, you're at SCOMathon, so we're going to say SCOM is not going anywhere just for the sake of it. It is here. With the release of System Center 2022, we've many more years of full Microsoft support just on that platform. So it's a question I get asked a lot from customers, particularly with the primary focus that I have these days being cloud and then on-prem secondary. So it's like all these years you've done with SCOM, do you need it anymore? Can we go full cloud monitoring now or what? My answer is normally you're going to need probably a bit of both at least. But please be aware and please be confident that your skills, your investments that your organization has made in those SCOM and System Center deployments, they're still fully valid, and Microsoft are bringing us all on that journey for the next 10 years anyway. So happy days. So some use case scenarios for when you need SCOM. Again, these are kind of nearly verbatim conversations that I have with our customers on a regular basis. So when you need SCOM, I would say if you're looking for a best in class or best of breed monitoring for your Microsoft applications and operating systems, who better to go to than Microsoft to do that? Microsoft are the software developers for those products, and their best in breed monitoring tool for the whole chain and the whole diversity of Microsoft applications and operating systems. The go-to monitoring tool is still, and for a long time will be, SCOM, as we know it, at least for now. To monitor all of your non-Microsoft workloads. So if you wanted to monitor the Microsoft stuff, that's cool, easy peasy. If you want to monitor non-Microsoft stuff, so your cross-platform, your Linux, your Unix, Oracle, VMware, anything non-Microsoft, SCOM, as most people on this call will know, SCOM will bring those into your monitoring environment. People often forget about other components that require monitoring, particularly in an on-prem data center environment. So things like air conditioning units, UPS, backup batteries, all those type of things that bring feeds in via, say, SNMP. Typically, it's fairly difficult to get those up into a cloud-native monitoring solution by default. So SCOM can do that, as many people on the call know, very, very easily. So that's another scenario when you should be looking at SCOM to bring in those non-Microsoft workloads. Hardware as well. So it's agnostic completely to software. So you can bring in all of your physical hardware around your servers, your different vendors, your Dell, Fujitsu, VMware, Hyper-V. I could go on. We know there's hundreds of management packs out there to deliver these scenarios. Another feature of mine, favorite feature of mine with SCOM over the years has been the distributed applications or IT service modeling, as we call it. We're a managed service provider in Ergo, and we have been for quite some time. And SCOM would be the underpinning monitoring tool that provides that 360-degree monitoring view for our customers' IT service catalog. So when we take an application, like a line of business application, it's typically not just the software in that application. It's going to be potentially the servers that it's running on. It's going to be the hypervisor that it's coming from. If we go more granular into the data center, as I mentioned earlier, it could be the UPS, or it could be the physical switches, whatever. But we can bundle all of them into a single IT service model in the form of a SCOM distributed application. And we could present that up into a nice, easy to consume dashboard up on the screen in our NOC, or on the CIO's secondary monitor in his office, whatever. Once we've modeled those IT services, and this is not new to 2022, by the way, so this is around a long time. Once we've modeled those IT service models, what we can then do is we can attach service level agreements to them. So the CIO typically doesn't often need to know every single time an application or a workload goes down. But what they might need to know is when they come to the enterprise IT administrator or IT manager, they might need to know, hey, look, we've given you budget to keep, I don't know, Active Directory online for 95% of the time. So you might have a 5% window over a 12-month period or 30-day period where that particular IT service can be down for things like maintenance or just ad hoc problems. So with something like SCOM, the rich reporting that backends with SQL reporting services and the SLA capability that you can attach to either your service models or individual objects, that's super important and really, really straightforward and easy to deploy and configure with SCOM. Not so straightforward and easy to deploy with the newer cloud-based monitoring platforms at the moment. So typically when customers say they need that type of scenario, or if you're in a managed service provider environment, SCOM, number one tool, get it in first, and then let's look at how we can augment that and make it even better by attaching it to things like Azure Monitor and maybe Sentinel as well. So some of the fundamentals and monitoring experience, I know the guys from the product group have spoken about these earlier, so I won't go too deep into them. But again, this slide just really reinforces there is a lot of investment that's going into SCOM now. I certainly remember in all those years, as Tim pointed out, that I've been working with SCOM, I certainly remember there's been some very barren years where I probably wouldn't fill even half of this slide with new features that came out in a new SCOM release. So it is refreshing and comforting to know that there's still quite a bit of innovation going into that that new SCOM platform that we're seeing now released with SCOM 2022, and some cool little features added in here as well. So always nice to see. It's not just a tick box exercise, but good focus on things like security and certainly performance. I've noticed a real big performance improvement in this version of SCOM. So happy days on that. So these are a couple of things that you may or may not be aware of if you've already deployed SCOM 2022 or even SCOM 2019. There's just a couple of little gotchas I like to talk to people about, particularly an audience like this, where I know most people on this at this event will be very, very familiar with SCOM and very seasoned using the different versions. So if you're not aware of the log on as a service requirement and you go and you deploy SCOM 2022, or as I said, SCOM 2019, off you go, try and push an agent out to it, and straight up, it's going to give you a discovery failed. And you're going to think firewall, you're going to think DNS, user account permissions. all types of things are going through your head. Realistically, all that you need to do is grant a specific permission on each management server. It's in the prerequisites, it's in the documentation, just to allow the log on as a service permission. You can get quite granular with it, but I suppose the call out here is just to be aware of it as well. RTFM, read the friendly manual. It's the same for every piece of technology. Most of the time, us technologists, we don't read the manual, but unfortunately, if you don't, you're going to miss very simple steps like this. But definitely something just to watch out for. Such a simple thing. Log on as a service requirement. It's new from 2019 onwards, and it will catch you out if you're not aware of it. Another issue, and this one comes with SCOM 2022. So we would deploy our SCOM 2022 deployments with a backend of SQL 2019 and SQL reporting services, the latest version. And you most likely will hit this problem. Again, it's documented, but you most likely hit this problem whereby you'll see the error on the right-hand side about data warehouse failing to deploy reports. So when you go into the reporting services view and you want to have a look at some reports, you'll find that a bunch of them have not been deployed, and you'll see this error. Again, it's Microsoft just being uber careful with security on the SQL side. So on the SQL reporting services configuration side, there is a new parameter simply called allowed resource extensions for upload that you need to modify to allow the specific SCOM resources to pass through it. So I've created a tiny URL link here, and you'll see these links throughout the presentation. Of course, I'll provide this deck to the Scomathon team, and you can just quickly get straight to the documentation site where we'll give you the information on it. But just another simple gotcha, something to look out for. I always like to kind of start my SCOM presentations with these little notes from the field and these learnings, just to make it a little bit more real for people as well. Another one, so again, Azure, as I said, is a big area for us, and we're always looking at how we can augment and enhance our on-premises SCOM environments with cloud, in particular Azure. So SCOM 2022 supports .NET 4.6 and above for its prerequisites and deployment. But what we've found is that if .NET Framework 4.8 is not deployed when it's running on Windows Server 2022, then it will give an error like this, and the log analytics connector won't work. It will just throw an error like this, and it's just very easy to find on a quick Google Foo search. But again, just something to watch out for. If you're deploying your prerequisites, .NET Framework 4.8 will solve that problem for you. Another one, more just an FYI, and it applies to, in particular, us over here in Ireland, because our default or our go-to Azure region would be North Europe, because it's based here in Dublin. So the North Europe region is not supported yet for log analytics workspace connectivity with SCOM. So you can deploy a log analytics workspace in Azure in North Europe region, but SCOM will not pick it up, or at least if it picks it up, it will give you errors, and it's just going to cause problems if you try and get that connecting in. So do be aware. I appreciate that most of the audience here is probably going to be from the UK or West Europe regions, and that's fine. You've been thought about, we haven't. But just be aware, any folks here from North Europe or from any other region that's not in this list here, just be aware that when you go to create that log analytics connection from SCOM to Azure, that it won't work and is not supported if it's not one of these regions. So the next few slides are slides that I've literally presented at nearly every year, every time I speak about SCOM. And it's not that I want to kind of skip corners and just kind of show the same content all the time just for the sake of it. It's because I'm really passionate about some of these solutions that are available for free from the community and that work with the latest versions of SCOM. So the first one is the Ops Manager Self-Maintenance Management Pack, which was originally started by my good buddy Tao Yang in Australia, and which was now kindly taken over from the SCOM ninjas in Cooktown. So this works perfectly well with SCOM 2022 and SCOM 2019. And from a SCOM administrator's perspective, you can absolutely, you're missing a trick if you don't put it in, basically. You can back up all your management packs, unsealed, sealed, whatever you want to do. You can bulk remove discoveries. There's so much stuff that you can do with it. It's a no-brainer. So for those of you that are using it, well done. For those of you that are not using it, it's free. Click the link below and you're good to go. Another management pack, again for free, that is that's really important and should be used is Kevin Holman's SCOM Administrator Management Pack. And this one, again, if you're not using it, you're missing a trick too. This one, Kevin regularly updates it. His most recent update has made it applicable and made it work with SCOM 2022. But you can look at things like the update roll-up levels. You can we use this one a lot for migrating from legacy SCOM management groups, where we can bulk change the management group reference on a multi-homed agent. And you can restart the health service remotely. You can flush it out, unlike the default operations manager management pack task that doesn't do it very well. There's so many cool tricks that you can do with that. So if you're not using this management pack, please download it from Kevin's GitHub and you're good to go. And then finally, on the recommended management packs from a community perspective is Nathan Gow's Security Monitoring Management Pack. And this one has been on the scene a few years. And a few years back, I was lucky enough, Nathan asked myself and a number of other much wiser SCOM MVPs at the time to help sanity check this management pack. And it's really awesome. And we put it into pretty much all of our customer environments. Takes a bit of tuning, needs to be understood. You need to figure out what's relevant for your environment and what's not. But a really, really neat walkthrough there on Nathan's website. And it will pick up, if you don't have any other security services or security monitoring services in your environment, it will pick up a bunch of things that you're absolutely missing, you've no visibility of at the moment. Even if you do have a security, like a SIEM platform, and it's managed, by the secret ninja group of your security team, and you don't have visibility of it, it's no harm to get that information into your central SCOM environment, particularly when you're modeling your IT services on a centralized ITSM dashboard as well. So that's a really cool management pack. I know Nathan is going to talk a little bit about that later on. He's got a session on connecting the events and the rules from this management pack up to Microsoft Sentinel as well. So I'll leave all the goodness and the demos on that for Nathan to run through. But again, another recommended community management pack for SCOM 2022 as well. And then finally, if I'm talking about recommended management packs and we are talking about what's next and, where should we go, and in the product group session that was on before lunch, there was a lot of questions coming to the guys around, what's happening with the future and are we moving forward? And a lot of the time people are concerned as well about their skills. Where are my skills going to land? Am I going to be able to use my SCOM skills? Like, I don't want to go to Azure. I don't want this cloud. I'm happy being an on-premises, engineer or administrator. That's fine. Totally get it, right? But at some point, that decision will be taken away from you. Like the blockbusters and the traditional DVD and VHS stores were taken away from us and replaced with Netflix. It's progression, it's future-proofing that industry, and in our game, the cloud is essentially future-proofing it. So we're seeing in the last number of years, in the last 2-3 years, we're seeing huge numbers of our customers. Actually, I'd say the majority of our customers, and we have a lot of customers, we're seeing the majority of them connecting at least some components of their IT estate to Azure. So either bringing existing resources from on-premises up to the cloud, or even spinning up new resources in the cloud. So instead of funding a new rack in a data center or a new ESX host or whatever, they're just spinning that workload up in the cloud. And what that means for us as monitoring administrators and if you like, cloud administrators and on-prem IT admins, we need a centralized view of the workloads in the cloud and the workloads on-prem. So to do that, thankfully, at least on the Microsoft side, Microsoft have released a good number of years ago now, and each year it gets better and better, the Azure Management Pack. And I'll give you a little demo of this in a few minutes just to show how easy it is once it's connected to get that visibility of those Azure workloads and to bring them into SCOM. So again, you have that centralized view. But it's really neat. You can get a lot of information out of Azure back down to on-prem. And if you've got workloads up there, or if you've got customers who have workloads up there, and they also have SCOM, I would absolutely recommend that you get this management pack in. Okay, so let me just flip over quickly to our SCOM demo. So this is SCOM 2022. So it doesn't look any different to on the surface of it to what we would see typically in previous versions of SCOM. All the UI, it's that same kind of wonder bar kind of experience. All good. My first impression on SCOM 2022 was the performance. Yes, this is only a small demo environment of mine. But overall, the performance is really great. Even just updating rules and overrides and things like that, it's really, really great. So here's all of our some new settings. Like you've got settings in here around task execution, things like that. We've got new roles, as the guys talked about earlier. So you've got like your read-only administrator, and you've got your delegated administrator here, where you can just update new custom roles whichever way you want, whichever way you need. And of course, we've got our connections here. So this was the log analytics connection that hit us with an error unless we upgraded, again, specific to Windows Server 2022, unless we upgraded to .NET Framework 4.8. But once we did, this is all good. And this is the Azure Management Pack. So once we bring the Azure Management Pack into SCOM, we can connect up multiple subscriptions across multiple tenants as well. So it doesn't have to be the same one. If you're using something like Azure Lighthouse as well, you can really extend that view. Other than that, pretty much on the surface of it, everything else looks the same, which is good. So there's no huge new ramp up. There's no learning curve outside of the skills that you already have. And it's nice and easy to use. From an Azure perspective, so what we want to do is we put the management pack in. As you saw, we've connected up to Azure. This gives us that true hybrid monitoring experience. And we can see here, I've got a couple of simple alerts. If I want to look at things like my Azure resource groups, I can see the resource groups and the location where they are in Azure. I can see their path from an Azure perspective, their ID, all of that useful information. I can get things like service state. I can do topologies. I won't go into that now because I've got a lot in my Azure environment. It will take some time to enumerate, but that gives you that kind of spider view, similar to the network monitoring view that you would be used to seeing. Things like Azure Resource Inventory, your performance metrics, egress, use capacity. You can turn all of these on really, really easy just by configuring a management pack template for Azure. And up here, again, very simple. You don't need to be an Azure Ninja, even a SCOM Ninja. We just got to read the manual, right? RTFM, as I said earlier. So you can select your resource groups that you want to bring in. You can select the relevant service types. You can put in exclusions. You can even configure the specific metrics. So if you want to bring in metrics on your VMs, these are all the metrics that are presented from Azure back to SCOM via the management pack. Things like your networking from on the Azure side, you can bring byte sent, received, packet sent, that type of stuff. And then things like, public IP addresses. So your Azure public IPs, your storage accounts, really key area of Azure management. So I've got some alerts, some metric alerts configured here for used capacity and for egress as well. So there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with this management pack. I do remember the very first version of this that Microsoft released, and it was like trying to do a Rubik's Cube while cycling on a unicycle. It was that difficult. So much easier to configure now. There's not many dependencies at all, and I do totally encourage you to get on board with that and to get it up and running. Okay, so next we have, one sec now, go back to the deck. So that's SCOM. So Azure Monitor. So Azure Monitor is Microsoft's cloud-native monitoring solution, which is used primarily for Azure-based workloads. So not only for Azure-based workloads, but primarily for Azure-based workloads. So it's a common platform, so you can bring in all of the relevant metrics, logs, and other monitoring telemetry across your Azure tenant. So this is completely independent of SCOM. It's not related to management packs or anything like that. Just if you've got resources up in Azure, Azure Monitor, in some cases, will automatically present monitoring data back to you. So you don't even need to do anything for things like storage accounts and key vaults and stuff like that, Azure Monitor will automatically present that data back to you purely by picking up the metrics and the activity logs and diagnostic logs that you would natively configure for that particular resource. So when would you use Azure Monitor? Some good use cases. So you would use it to quickly onboard monitoring at scale for your Azure resources. If you need to have governance and compliance of your monitoring using Azure policy. So when you start getting down and dirty with Azure, one of the first things that you're going to need to consider is your Azure landing zone, right? So your Azure landing zone is essentially potentially the virtual networking environment that you put your workloads into. You may segment them using a thing like a hub spoke design, and then you underpin it with governance. So you'll use a service called Azure Policy to define, for example, all virtual machines that get deployed to my Azure tenant must have the Azure Monitoring agent on it, which is essentially the SCOM agent, and it's the same health service. So you can do that very easily from a centralized kind of management plane in Azure, and you can define compliance, governance, security, all from that top level governance plane up in Azure. We do a lot of DevOps as well now, so I'm the reluctant ops on the side of DevOps. So I've been dragged kicking and screaming into DevOps over the last few years. So if you want to do, or if you need to do, which you should be if you're doing cloud, CI/CD with DevOps, again, this is where Azure Monitor plays nicely into it. So you can use things like simple JSON, well, not simple, but you can use JSON templates, you can use Azure Bicep, or even external third-party languages like Terraform, or DSLs like Terraform as well. But it can all be managed with code in a central repository in somewhere like Azure DevOps or GitHub, and it just brings that full kind of cloud management team into play, rather than the kind of Lone Ranger one-person dependency that you would often get with non-DevOps tooling and platforms per se. If you want to gather monitoring data from across multiple Azure tenants, so if you say again, we're a managed service provider, so we've got many customers who we manage their Azure environments for, or we at least augment a managed service team with. So what we would do is we would use a service in Azure called Azure Lighthouse. We would bring those workloads, those log analytics workspaces, and those Azure Monitor environments into at least visibility of them into a centralized management tenant. And from there, we would then be able to manage them with CI/CD, with DevOps. We could present monitoring data using the Azure Monitor service across multiple different resource types. And it really, really does bring the benefit of scale that we previously wouldn't have had when we look at SCOM, going back to the old way of having to connect management groups and create Active Directory trusts and that type of stuff. There's a lot of stuff there that you would have had to really, really architect and spend a lot of time doing it on-prem, whereas in the cloud, it makes it much easier to scale out. And another scenario where you might use Azure Monitor is for enhanced cloud monitoring scenarios. So, or things like that SCOM doesn't have, or maybe SCOM does have certain services, but doesn't do it as well in certain scenarios as the cloud, as Azure Monitor. So I give one good example would be the APM, or the Application Performance Monitoring feature. So the APM feature in SCOM is really good, and I've used it quite a bit over a few years ago, but probably in the last 3 years, not so much. So what we tend to do, if a customer has a web-based application, particularly one running in the cloud, and they want to get that application performance monitoring, code level visibility, global synthetic transactions, global availability tests and checks, we will leverage Azure Monitor to do that. And we can always bring the metrics and the data from that back down to SCOM for centralized visibility if we need to, using the Azure Management Pack as well. So there's definitely some scenarios where you might use one or the other, or a combination of both. We've got things in Azure Monitor like insights. So you can deep dive into insights. You can do things like near real-time monitoring with virtual machine insights, health diagnostics, stuff that you're familiar with doing easily in SCOM. That's all part of Azure Monitor as well. And then you've got, as I mentioned earlier, the application stack, but we can go really deep with the applications up in Azure Monitor. We can use things like App Insights to get us visibility into things like into languages like .NET, Java, Node.js, all these other kind of OSS non Microsoft friendly kind of languages that some applications could be built on as well. We can create dependency maps very, very easily, by the way. So I know we can do that a little bit with a little bit of kind of messing around in SCOM. We can get dependency maps certainly squared up, have the VADA offering, which will do that for you. But natively out of the box, it's something that you can certainly augment with Azure Monitor very, very easy. And this is a dependency mapping feature here. I love this feature. This came as part of an acquisition into Microsoft a good number of years ago now from a company called Blue Stripe. So from a monitoring perspective, it's great. You can see all of the endpoints, all of the communication pathways that a specific workload is communicating with. But we also use this service a lot for migration scenarios, because when customers say, hey, look, I want to migrate all of these workloads from my data center up to the cloud, for whatever reason, then you need to understand the monitoring behind that first and foremost. You need to understand the metrics behind it. What will that workload look like in the cloud? Is it going to have 32 gigabytes of RAM and 8 CPU, or is it going to be less? Let's get Azure Monitor and or SCOM. If we connect the two, we can get the best of both worlds. Let's get them to give us the visibility. But what SCOM won't do very quickly and easily, which Azure Monitor does, is this dependency mapping. And it's brilliant for when we want to have migration scenarios where you might have that stereotypical server sitting under a desk or sitting in an old comms cabinet, and nobody knows what it does except the sticker that says, please don't turn it off, because the scream test always works. With dependency mapping in Azure Monitor, it will map out all of the components, and you will know, right now, I have the performance metrics, I have the availability, I have the connectivity bandwidth, and also I have the dependency. So I can create a migration group. I can right click and control right click on each of the components it's communicating with, and then I can bundle them into a group in Azure Monitor, which I will then leverage as a migration group for cost management and monitoring, and obviously security as well. So really neat feature. So I mentioned about your SCOM skills, and I just wanted to put this slide together just to show people, if all those years that we've spent doing SCOM, and, I look at the MVP community that, I've been a part of, thankfully, for many years. And, we've all written books, we've presented on a lot of stuff. Does that go away? How easy does it make moving into the cloud on that cloud journey? And it makes it easy because things like your skills for agent management, multi-homing, that maps into Azure Monitor agent management. Things like Health Explorer, alert tuning. If you want to configure your virtual machine insights in Azure Monitor, those skills already directly map to it. If you're familiar with performance views and working with performance views and reports in SCOM, Azure Metrics, no-brainer, super simple. If you're familiar with creating dashboards, I saw Wade's session earlier, it was really nice. Those skills for creating dashboards in SCOM natively, you'll be able to do them in Log Analytics Solutions. You can either use the out-of-the-box ones, or you can create your own custom ones, at least half customize them. Distributed applications, I mentioned the service map dependency. You can configure all of the dependent components of a specific IT service, or at least represented in Azure. And the concept here would be very, very straightforward and very easy for you to understand, coming from that SCOM world up into the cloud. And then again, if you're familiar with creating custom rules, I'm sure every one of us have tweaked custom rules, created new ones, configured. Alert rules configuration in Azure is nearly identical. It's the exact same. Channels, subscriptions, subscribers, that just maps over to action groups in Azure. So a lot of these skills that you already have, on top of maybe your traditional Active Directory and DNS and maybe networking skills on-prem, they will all map to that new horizon of, transitioning from an IT pro, a typical IT pro, to maybe a cloud engineer or a cloud administrator or whatever the title is. But you're bringing that along with you in a way that, kids coming out of college these days probably don't have that real world hands-on and that knowledge to lean back on. So it's not a big ramp up as you might think. And then there's a new language, well, a few years new anyway, with which underpins Azure Monitor and Microsoft Sentinel, and it's called Custo Query Language, or KQL. So I'm not going to spend much time on it here. I'd say possibly in Nathan's session, you're going to see some KQL on the Sentinel configuration. If you have not used KQL, or if you're not aware of it, or if you want to get started with it, I would absolutely suggest start with the official documentation. There's loads of stuff on microsoftlearn.com. There's loads of community walkthroughs. KQL is really important for your Azure Kung Fu going forward. So please do use that, because it will certainly help you as you look to parse data that's coming up from SCOM and present it in a much more easy to understand format up in Azure Monitor or Sentinel as well. So really useful. Okay, just a quick demo of Azure Monitor. Just going to do a quick highlights tour. So this is Azure Monitor here, up in my demo tenant. So we've got all of the typical stuff that you would expect from any monitoring tool. We've got an activity log, we've got alerts. So this is, you can see there's alerts here coming in from one of my demo SCOM environments on-prem. It's an older environment. I think this is a 2016 SCOM. Metrics, this is like your performance view, your performance metrics. Logs, this is your log analytics. This is your queries that you will have with your KQL or your Custo query language. So you can get things like virtual machine disk space. If I select scope here, let me select multiple, where are we? So here, if I select this, hopefully this will work. No, demo gods, don't worry about it. Service health, that's just a scoping issue. I don't want to waste time on it. So service health will tell you all about your Azure health. So the services of your Azure health, you can create health alerts. So if, for example, you have a workload running in Azure that, you know, the Microsoft data center is giving problems, the service health service will inform you of that by an alert. You can certainly pull that into SCOM as well using the Azure Management Pack. Workbooks is your reports. So reporting in Azure is very different to reporting on-prem. That's another reason when people say, you know, if I move all my monitoring to Azure, will I get the same rich reporting experience that I have with SCOM? The answer is no, it's different. I'm not saying it's worse. I'm just saying it's different. And you need to change your expectations. Your customer needs to change their expectations as well on what they have and what they need. So, but there's a lot of stuff that you can do with the workbooks feature in Azure Monitor. And then if we look at, say, our virtual machines, again, to show you some ideas of what maybe some of your skills might look like, your SCOM skills. If we look here, this looks very, very similar to the Health Explorer. So you can see it's a much more basic version, but you can see things like your free space. If you want to go in, you want to perform an override. This is where your SCOM skills come. Like this looks exactly like what we do in SCOM. Now, this specific preview is being deprecated. It'll be replaced with a slightly different thing, a new enhancement of alert rules, but it would be the same concept. Your alert tuning of that specific workload would be what you need to look at and use those skill sets coming forward. And then finally, just some of the native stuff. You know, you don't need to know much about what storage accounts are or how to configure them for monitoring, because they automatically present their monitoring data via activity logs and diagnostic logs up into Azure Monitor. So these are like agent-less monitoring, whereas virtual machines will be agent-based. So there's a lot of stuff in there. I could spend the whole session just talking about Azure Monitor, but just to give you that kind of flavor of interconnectivity and separation and enhancements as to what you get up in the cloud. So Sentinel, what is Microsoft Sentinel? So Sentinel is Microsoft's cloud security information and event manager platform. So that's a mouthful. Most people usually just say it's a SIEM or a CM platform. So it's like with SCOM, when customers say, why should I use Sentinel instead of, you know, another more mature, well-known SIEM? Like, they're equally as good, if not better, to be fair. However, I normally pitch with the same story and scenario I go with SCOM. If it's a Microsoft environment predominantly, and this is because it's Azure, surely you would want the vendor who has developed those resources and the code for those resources to also be the ones providing the best practices, security, and most up-to-date kind of rule sets and templates and stuff. And that's kind of where the Sentinel SIEM comes into play. With Azure, because it's cloud native, it's fully in the cloud, It has built-in artificial intelligence and machine learning, which is the back end of Azure. And it can go and it can collect, detect, investigate, and even respond to security threats across your estate. So it's really, really cool. So use Sentinel for when you need centralized visibility of all the security events across your environment, but equally with the power, the compute power of a cloud platform like Azure brings to it. Use it when you need centralized governance and compliance of your security posture via Azure policy. If you need to do CI/CD DevOps management for security, or if you need to gather information again from multiple different Azure tenants using Azure Lighthouse, you can have Sentinel bring in all of using different join queries in KQL, you can bring in different security monitoring scenarios as well. So you might notice that the last 3 points there are nearly identical to the same 3 points that I talked about with Azure Monitor. And you'd be right, because governance and compliance from a centralized platform in the cloud, CI/CD with DevOps, and multiple tenant scalability, if you like, they're all part of what you get with the cloud, whether it's a monitoring platform like Azure Monitor or a security monitoring platform like Sentinel, you get that same consistency as well, which is good. And then just a very quick overview of Sentinel. Again, Nathan will run through this in more detail. This is Sentinel in my very simple demo environment. You can see over the last 24 hours, we pulled in 287,000 events. So if I tried to do that natively in SCOM, I have to use ACS, or Audit Collection Services. And if I do that, I'm talking about terabyte-sized SQL databases, talking about huge on-prem infrastructure. It just doesn't make sense from a financial perspective when I go and I pitch that as an architecture design to a small to medium-sized customer, even an enterprise customer these days. So having a centralized logging location that can pull in data, and I've got very, very few workloads here. If you've got anywhere like a few hundred or a few thousand, you're up into the millions of events in the last 24 hours. But having that with the cloud compute and the scalability and the power behind it, it's a no-brainer. You can do things like incident management. Thankfully, I have no incidents here. Workbooks, so you can see the common trend. In Azure Monitor, we had workbooks. In Sentinel, we have workbooks. These are essentially the reporting component. We've got different workbooks that we can plug in here for things like the Apache Log4j, my Azure Activity, audit logs, all that cool stuff. I can just turn them on. If you think of the way we turn on management packs in SCOM, so if a customer says, or if your users say, I need a specific monitoring scenario for this, that's fine, no problem. You go and you put a management pack in, or you'll ask that question, is there a management pack for? With Sentinel, the question should be, is there a data connector for, right? And typically we've got built-in data connectors here for all of the Microsoft stack, and then a bunch of third-party vendors. There's AWS. Each of these, like the SCOM management packs, open connector page. This is basically how the heck do I configure this to get the data from my environment in, and it will walk you through this very, very quickly and very, very easily. Most of them are really super easy to set up, but some of them you might need a little bit of extra assistance with, or you might just need to spend a bit more time, read through the vendor documentation. But there are, like, natively, there's 123 connectors at the moment. I've only connected 8 of them. And then you can always go to the content hub. So this is a preview, but this is nice. It's like the marketplace that we have in SCOM. So here we can just say, right, I want something for Microsoft Teams. Okay, and I can install this, and then this will have a data connector. It will pull in data from Teams. It will have workbooks. It will have some pre-configured analytics rules, hunting queries, playbooks, all that stuff that's relevant to Sentinel, but also that's very, very relevant to the, in this case, my Microsoft Teams or my Modern Workplace team. So again, the knowledge that you have and the career mindset that you have from your SCOM experience, a lot of that will map very, very easily into these new cloud native platforms. I'm not saying Azure's easy, but I'm just saying it will give you a head start if you want to learn and you want to get a bit more hands-on with that type of stuff. And then just bringing it all together. So if we look at how we would bring it together, I'd say, connect your SCOM to your Azure environment. If you have SCOM, brilliant. Or if your customers have SCOM, connect it up to Azure. If you don't have Azure, talk to them about how they can add value. Things like APM, things like Sentinel, there's plenty of different resources. Backup, DR. There's many different options that you should be talking to your customers about cloud scenarios, and then connect SCOM so you can get monitoring visibility. If they don't have SCOM, or if SCOM is too big a deployment, maybe they're a small customer, or the architecture and the skills needed are too much, there's a service called Azure Arc, and Arc will extend the Azure management experience from Azure out to your on-premises workloads, or it doesn't even have to be on-prem. They can be in AWS or Google. They can be wherever. Once it's agent-based, an Arc deployment is, so they bring in those resources even without SCOM. So you have many different options. These are just two, but many different options that you can bring your workloads into Azure, and you can create that pure, true hybrid scenario. Another way I love presenting my data, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, is using dashboards. So this is my Fisher-Price attempt at an Azure dashboards, an Azure native dashboard. The component here, the key piece here, is that across this, I can bring in things like Arc workloads, Azure Activity Log, Service Map, AD. Some of these will be coming in from SCOM. Like, I can mix this up completely, and I can just bring in widgets in the dashboard that will present data from multiple cloud, multiple on-prem. It doesn't matter. The point is that it's all centralized. If you want to look a little bit deeper and something a bit sexier than my native ones, for example, our friends at Squared Up have the Squared Up dashboard experience for SCOM, which is great. We use that in all of our SCOM customers, and also for Azure as well. So a key area here would be not just presenting in one dashboard, not just presenting the availability and the performance of the workloads, but also presenting the cost management. So how much is this costing me? So the CFO can look at it and say, that's too much. You're hitting the barriers on your budget as well. So there's a lot to be considered there, but very easy to bring into a dashboard. And then the final section is just a little glimpse into the future. So what does it look like? We've talked, and I know it's been a whirlwind talk, right? But we've talked about SCOM, we've talked about Azure Monitor, we've talked about Microsoft Sentinel. What's coming next? And a lot of questions were coming into the guys in the product group around what's next. Like, are we? And my assumption would be the questions of what next is not, when is the next version of SCOM? Like, is it going to be SCOM 2025 or SCOM 2026? I've got a feeling people are looking for what's the next thing that's going to absolutely change the game. And some of these links here are just what's coming in Azure Monitor. So these are preview services in Azure Monitor. And the guys on the product group session earlier, they did make reference to, and a couple of years ago, ZDNet brought up this Microsoft Aquila, which may or may not be a product. And the team more recently spoke about hybrid monitoring with SCOM. And of course, this is all up in the air and it's hearsay, and we can only go on what we have in front of us here. But from a traditional SCOM administrator and consultant who has now moved into that cloud journey, and I know most people on this call will be going the same route if you're not there already, I want to have that consistent experience. I want to be able to reuse my management packs. I want to be able to reuse my skills. I don't want to have to go tuning all my alerts again, those custom alerts that you spent weeks, months, years putting in for really bespoke line of business apps. And I do want to modernize, though. I don't want to have to keep spinning up new on-prem servers, new VMware, new Hyper-V hosts. That's just becoming a legacy scenario. So if Microsoft gave us something where we could reuse all of that technology, but with the benefits of the cloud, that also leverage the stuff I talked about with Azure Monitor and Sentinel around CI/CD DevOps, around centralized governance, scalability, multi-tenancy, wouldn't that just be awesome? So folks, that's my whirlwind session on Microsoft monitoring in the modern world. If you have any questions, I'm going to hang on for the next while here, and then I'm going to be on a panel session later on as well. So feel free to hit me up with whatever you need.
Brilliant. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Kevin, for that awesome presentation. Just to let everyone know that, as Kevin said, he is going to stay on here and answer any questions if you've got them. But the next session is kicking off already, where Bruce and Nathan from Cookdown are going to be talking about using webhooks to raise alerts in SCOM. So please do go and join that, unless you've got a specific question for Kevin and want to stick around and chat to him. But thanks again, Kevin. Awesome to see you, and really appreciate your support.
No problem. Okay, so I'll see if I can go through some questions here, Tim, while I'm waiting. Hey, Rosie. Okay, who have we got? Anders, nice to see your face again. Yeah, we'll have some seafood soon. Okay, question from Andalino. How granular does the Azure Management Pack get in terms of specific VMs? So I think I showed that a little bit, and I'm sorry I'm only catching up on the questions now at the end of the session. But I think I showed you can get very granular with the metrics in the, this is, sorry, to Joseph, you can get quite granular with the metrics collection in SCOM with the Azure Management Pack. So basically it's whatever's presented as a metric in Azure Monitor, you'll be able to pull into SCOM. If you create custom metrics, you'll also be able to bring them in, but they're a little bit more difficult and a little bit more buggy, but it can get quite granular. So hopefully that's answered your question there, Joseph. Everyone else, hey Bob, hey Christian, hey Henrik, Michael, thanks a mil. And John, yeah, thanks. I don't see any other questions coming in. Okay. All right, folks, if that's it, I'm going to jump off and join some of the other cool sessions. If you need me, as I said, I'm going to be hanging around also on the Q&A panel later as well. So feel free to reach out. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.